everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, actually before that, I did chop my hair. I didn't chop my hair, but I got my hair cut and I don't like it. So we're just gonna have to deal with this. Like, it's not too bad, it's just she cut it really unevenly and I'm just not impressed. But anyway, today's video is going to be how I revised, because I post a lot of study with me's, as you will have seen, but I've never actually like addressed in a video how I actually revise and like the techniques that I use and resources that I make and just generally what I do to revise. So I thought that I would just make a whole video rounding it all up, and that is this video. So if you'd like to see how I revised, then just keep on watching. That was awkward, yeah, okay. Before we get into like techniques, resources, all that kind of stuff, I thought that I'd mention the 3 steps of revision that I kind of lived by during GCSEs and A-levels. And you're probably like, this is common knowledge, but I just thought I'd put it in here. These are things that you should do throughout like the whole of the course of like GCSEs or A-levels, like not just in like exam season or like full-on revision period. Like, these are things that you should be doing throughout the whole year. So first step is to actually understand what you're trying to revise, because without actually understanding it in the first place, you can't expect to remember it. Like, you can't expect something that you don't even like know what it's going on about to actually stay in your brain. So first step is understand everything that you are learning. So if you don't understand something in the lesson, ask your teacher, even if it's just at the end of the lesson. Don't let things that you just don't get pile up, because it's just going to get so overwhelming, and when you actually sit down to revise, you're going to realise, like, I don't even understand half of this. Second step is to actually memorise it, and this is like probably what everyone thinks of when they think revision, like memorising information, and it is kind of arguably the most important step. So you need to make sure that everything stays in your head, and you need to make sure that you know the content inside and out, because the content is the basis of your exam. It's what you're being tested on. Memorising should definitely be something that you do as you go along. Don't leave all of like your proper like get in my brain revision till really close to exam season, because you are going to find it so hard to remember everything in like massive chunks. Just do it as you go along. So after each lesson, consolidate, and seriously, like, you may think, what's half an hour going back through my class notes gonna do for me? But seriously, you'd be surprised how much like it makes the information stay. You're literally gonna thank yourself so much when it gets to like the busy exam season period. Step 3 is going to be putting everything that you've learned into practice. That's what you need to do to pass exams. Like, you need to know what mark schemes are looking for. You need to know how to write answers to specific questions, and especially like for subjects like biology, application and being able to apply knowledge to new situations is so important, because their whole paper is application questions. Like paper 1 biology, I could recite the whole of the AS syllabus to you. Like, I could tell you how the heart works, how immunity works, I could tell you all about DNA. Did that help me? No. I felt like you really didn't need to know very much for the paper, like content wise, but you really needed to know how to answer these questions. Make sure that you are doing the practice questions, and again, do it as you go along. So on the weekend, after you've just had like a week of school, just go through like the textbook and do the practice questions, like at the end of the chapter or at the end of like the mini little sub-chapter that you've studied. Those are my like 3 main tips, and like they should be done in that order for every bit of the syllabus. Like, make sure you understand it, memorise it, and then put all that you've memorised into practice. And that way you can't really go wrong, because you know that you know everything, and you know that you know how to answer basic types of questions. Obviously there will be questions that you've never seen before, but most of the questions you'll kind of generally know which path they want you to go down with your answer. Now I'm going to move on to actual like revision techniques and resources that I use. The first resource that was arguably like the main way that I revised was making notes, and you will have seen my typed out notes everywhere because they are everywhere, like all over my study with me's. But rewriting notes in your own words is so useful to me, and this obviously depends on what kind of learner you are. I learn best through like writing and like seeing things on a piece of paper and like reading through things, and I feel like the best way to learn if you're that kind of learner is to make your own notes and go back through them. You're thinking, you're using your brain to make sense of all the information and make sure that you've just not skipped something by accident. Like you've gone through the whole textbook or your class notes, like you've collated all the information onto a document and you've like actively done it, if you get me. Like you've actually like thought about it, and it just kind of consolidates it in your brain again. And I made notes like as I went along, so whether that be in batches like during the holidays or even just like after school when I came home, just typing up the notes from that day. I feel like the best thing you could do in exam season is just practice and like just going over the odd bits and bobs that you may not be able to remember properly, but not fully making notes because that takes so much time. This is an example of my notes. As you can see, I just put a heading. This is the heading from the textbook, and then I just bullet point all of the information, and I just use bullet points because I feel like it's just a more manageable way of like taking in information for me rather than having like blocks of text. I feel like bullet points just make it seem shorter. I don't know, that's just personal preference, but really it's like up to you how you want to make your notes and how you want to structure them and what's going to be best for you. So I had like arrows in between certain phrases just to like remove unnecessary like words. I just feel like it just made it easier to like read through. And I have diagrams from the textbook or the internet, depending on which was best. My first port of call for these notes was the textbook. Obviously it's written by examiners. It kind of mainly has everything that you need to know. And then I just would go back through my class notes, see if there's any missing information, any other bits that I would like to have in my notes that I think are important. And then finally, definitely go back through your actual spec and make sure that everything that's on the spec is in these notes that you have, because these notes for me were the only things that I looked at. I never looked at my class notes ever again after I had notes for that chapter. And to revise from these notes, the main thing that I did was just read back through them. Like that's how I memorized all the information, was just reading back through my notes. And I know that there are so many studies like it's passive, it's not good, like it won't help you remember, but for some reason like that's just how I remembered. Like I wrote the notes, so it was already like kind of in my head, and then I just read back through them so many times that it eventually stuck in my head. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been through these notes, and definitely like reading them aloud. If you watched some of my recent study with me's, I was sat there like reading these notes aloud to myself and explaining things to myself, and like reading the first bit of the bullet points, so ATP, immediate energy source, and then I would carry on and see if I could remember exactly what was on the bullet point. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of how I dealt with essay subjects and like book subjects like English Lit or this year Latin. So personally, the main thing for like essays that I liked was mind maps. So I have some examples here of mind maps that I did for biology essays, and it's literally just the question and then like pretty much everything that I would write about that question, and there are like several here if you wanted to see some other ones, but they're all the same layout. And I do think that these were quite time consuming. Maybe a bit less detail than this would have been better, but mind maps is such a great way to like connect between different parts of the spec and like make links between different topics, because you can do it visually on the piece of paper and it kind of makes that link in your head. If I were making mind maps for like revision purposes, which I didn't at A level, but I definitely did at GCSE, so I'll show you some of my GCSE mind maps in a minute. But these are some mind maps that I made this year. It was just for one chapter, like chapter 18 biology. I don't know why I made mind maps. 2 mind maps, the whole of the A-level content for chapter 18 biology, and I just have the title, each little subsection, and I underlined like keywords. There is a balance to be found between like how nice you make your notes look and how much time you spend on these notes, but I feel like making them look pretty will kind of make you want to look back at them. These are some example mind maps that I used for science revision at GCSE, but it's a similar kind of thing. These are obviously less like covered in information. I stopped at A-level just because I thought that typing my notes out would be faster, but I think I'm gonna go back to like handwriting notes at uni. I'm not sure yet, but there's just something about writing out notes that like I feel like it makes it stay in my head more. This is an example of a character mind map that I made, and I really think that this was a great way of revising these essay type of subjects, because you can just write like the character, because mainly English Lit is like character theme. That's the kind of things that they can ask you essays about. So this is for Inspector Calls, my favourite text at GCSE. Generally it has like quote, analysis, explanation. It was really useful for revision because like just looking at the mind map I could see all like the main character traits that, for example, Sheila had, and then I could kind of try and in my head figure out like kind of analysis and like evidence and explanations for each one, so it would be like active revision, like trying to recall what was on this mind map. My theme mind maps I did a little bit differently. This time I wrote the quote in the big bright colour, and then I wrote like some of the analysis and stuff. There are plenty of mind maps that I have, like so many. Literally I just made them for every character and theme I could think of in each book. It's so simple, like theme, stuff coming off, analysis, evidence, explanations, quotes, like it makes sense, and then you can like draw links between different parts of the mind map. The next thing that I used are flashcards, so I have a few to show. Again, I used flashcards not as like the common question and answer, although I think they're called cue cards. But yeah, I didn't use like question and answer ones. I just put information on these flashcards that I really didn't like remember or I didn't know, and I just mainly used these as easy access information. This is not the whole of the photosynthesis chapter, but they're just like adaptations, and I could never remember the adaptations. And like respiration, just the bits of the chapter that I couldn't remember. And it was just so much easier than having to like dig back through all of my notes to find the thing that I couldn't remember, if you get me. Like it's just so accessible on a flashcard. And a similar kind of thing for chemistry. Well, I made functional group flashcards, so they're basically like a functional group, every single reaction ever of that, well not ever, but like that we had on the syllabus at the back of the flashcard, and that way I just had like everything about that functional group on it. So if I were doing a past paper and I didn't know some reaction of an alkene, like I just couldn't figure out how to like make the product, I could just look at this flashcard and like quickly see every single reaction, because obviously they're scattered throughout my notes because they're in different chapters. Another revision technique that I briefly used was blurting. Many thanks to Unjaded Jade for introducing us to the world of blurting. But basically I didn't really use it that much just because I felt like for me it was very time consuming. Like these things that I made took me like 20 minutes and 30 minutes. Like I feel like I could have gone through the chapter in that time. But if you can like recall information really quick, then blurting may be the thing for you. And it is really good because it's active recall, like you actually have to engage your brain to remember all the information. So how blurting works is, for example, you choose a topic, so photosynthesis, and you give yourself a time limit and you just write everything that you can remember on this piece of paper, and then you go back through in a different colour using your notes and just write on anything that you can remember and like stuff that you may have got wrong. And more than anything, I think this is reassuring for you, because sometimes you can feel like you just don't know anything, and you can just get yourself into a rut because you're just like, I don't know anything about respiration, like I can't do it, like I just can't remember anything. But then you don't really realise how much you can actually remember if you just sit down and put your mind to it. And it really just shows like the gaps in your knowledge and bits that you really need to work on. So for example, in the respiration bit, I quickly realised I didn't know anything about lipid respiration or protein respiration, like nothing. It's okay if this takes you like half an hour to remember everything about respiration, like don't get disheartened, because realistically in an exam it will get prompted. You won't need to just sit there and like recall all of respiration, like you will get a question and you will know which bits it wants you to talk about. Another thing that I want to touch on briefly are YouTube videos, and I definitely don't think that these should be like a main method of revision, because you can't like fully just rely on YouTube videos. You need to do your own revision from the textbook and from your notes by yourself. But definitely if you have a bit of like free time, then doing some like light revision, I guess, is literally so useful. Like you don't realise how much of that stuff actually stays in your head, especially if you don't understand a topic. Definitely find a YouTube video on YouTube about that topic, and it may actually help you understand. Sometimes your teacher really can't explain it to you in a way that you're going to understand. The main thing that I used, especially for biology, was Crash Course. I loved Crash Course. It was so good. I remember there was this one video about muscles. I genuinely couldn't do muscles. Like I just couldn't wrap my head around muscle fibers and how like you can have A bands and I bands in cells, and like how you could have a neuromuscular junction. Like I just couldn't do it, and I could understand the theory, but like I couldn't visualize to myself what a muscle fiber like looked like. The great thing about Crash Course is that they have diagrams and animations, and it's so helpful. So if you don't understand a bit in biology or like chemistry or something, see if there's a Crash Course video on it. I found a playlist actually, I'll see if I can find it again, of Crash Course videos for the majority of the AS and A2 biology specs. So if I can find it, I'll link it. And finally, the main thing that I think I did besides notes and like learning were doing practice questions. I have a massive wad of past papers in my room, currently sat on the floor because I need to recycle them, but I just did past paper after past paper. I just tried to get as many questions as I could get my hands on done, because sadly you can know all the content and you can still get a bad grade because you just need to know how to answer these questions, as I said in the start of this video. Actually, even whilst you're doing these past papers, you can learn, like, shock horror, you can actually like learn stuff that you didn't even know was a thing. So I remember vividly a question about purifying a liquid, and I just thought you just dumped some like anhydrous salt in there, but apparently it's like a whole process of like separating phenol, anhydrous salt, and then redistill. And I'd seen that on like 2 mark schemes, and I genuinely, like, it wasn't in my notes, it wasn't in the textbook, I'd never heard of it before, like in that particular order, but it was in that order on 2 mark schemes. So like I learnt it, and if a question ever came up about that, I would know because I saw it on a mark scheme. So like you can learn stuff as well from past papers that you perhaps didn't know. And it's also obviously amazing consolidation of knowledge. You just make sure that it's actually all in your brain. Once again, you can check for gaps in your knowledge, bits where you don't quite really know what you're going on about. Definitely also, if you're coming up to like exams, do go back through the past papers and like practice questions that you may have done, because yeah, you've done them, that's great, but like you want to make sure that you go back through the mistakes that you made, and you know like where you tend to make errors and where not to make them in the actual exam. So yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry this video was so rushed, like especially towards the end. I feel like I'm talking at like 1,000 miles per hour, but I have 15 minutes to leave the house and I still need to iron my shorts. So yeah, anyway, I do hope you've enjoyed this video and you found it helpful. I really hope that you have found it helpful, because I full on planned this. If you did, then be sure to give it a thumbs up. Can I speak? Right, a thumbs up. And you can also subscribe to my channel. The button is below this video. My social medias are in the description. You can follow those because I will be like updating you throughout the summer, because now I have nothing to do. Yay. And yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say today. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!